who's here live and on Zoom. This is a presentation to preview the 7 articles for changing the zoning bylaw that will be coming up at town meeting, part of the ongoing reform of the bylaw. My name is Tom Callahan. I'm the chair of the zoning bylaw committee and the planning board. And we'll get right into it. We have 7 articles. I've been told there's articles 16 through 22 on the warrant. Dealt with sometime later in the evening, I'm sure. I'm going to take one out of order, the first one out of order, which is Article 20. And that is the article dealing with the implementation of the MBTA Communities Act. So the MBTA Communities Act, for all those who don't know, is a piece of state legislation that was passed in 2022. And it is requiring that all towns with an MBTA station or adjacent to a town with an MBTA station create a zoning district where multifamily housing is allowed as of right. As of right just means that they won't need any kind of special permit or special relief from the planning board or zoning board in the town, but it does not mean that they don't have to go through all the other permitting processes such as conservation, wetlands, stormwater permits, Board of Health to get sewage disposal. And in our circumstance, it would be the Board of Health because there's no sewer nearby. And then also the planning board will have the ability to do what's called a site plan review, which we do for large commercial projects. That is not a yes or no permit, but it just makes sure that certain issues are addressed for the project so that it works with the area. So we have to do that. We have to create this district such that it has 15 units per acre, which is far denser than anything we have at the moment, far denser than the Avalon site. And and what they've done is the state, they've created a formula that applies to all towns the same, whether you're small or large. It's one of my critiques of the law, but what it means for Cohasset is that we had to come up with a district that was a minimum size of 43 acres. That, multiply that by 15, has the potential for 638 units. Now, I want to say potential because this law is not mandating anything to be actually built. It is just creating the zoning environment to allow it to be built. And the district needs to be near the train station. Most of it has to be, over 50% of it has to be within a half mile of the station. It is also, one of the other mandates of it is that it cannot have bedroom restrictions. It is designed to encourage family use and family development. Those of you who've been here for a while, when the Avalon came in under the 40B law, which also still exists, the zoning board was able to negotiate that project down to 2 bedrooms per unit. We won't be able to do that with this project. This zoning, if that comes to pass. So when the zoning bylaw committee started to look at this, one of our objectives was to comply with the law, but with guidance from other boards to do the minimum compliance that we needed to do, and also to make sure we kept the district out of existing residential districts. So we also received from the state, in its magnanimous gesture, they gave us a consultant who helped do all the calculations to make sure the district was sized properly. We discounted the idea of some of the district near the Cohasset station, some of it down on the Situate line near the North Situate station, because it would lead to too many units, far more than we needed. And so what's on the screen right now, just so you see, is the actual state law. It's short and sweet compared to things like 40B. It is a very short statute. It amends the state zoning code by adding a new section 3A. The devil is in the details of the regulations that the state has passed, and that has been a work in progress over the last 2 years. And originally, Cohasset was projected to zone for 750 units. Well, we're down to 638. So if we can show the map, I'll start with the map about where it is. So The area in orange is the area where we're proposing for the district. And it is actually 55 acres because the parcel that is on the, I guess you would call it the east side of 3A as you're heading north, right next to the mixed-use building where the gym and condos are above on 3A. That is largely a wetlands parcel. We needed that parcel to make the district connect across the street, as you can see, but we needed the connectivity of that district. So the wetlands aren't going to be buildable, but we did have to include that. So we have a 55-acre size district. It includes already developed properties where you see the cul-de-sac at the bottom of the district, the southernmost end of the district. That is called Situate Hill Road. Right now, there is a new project that is being built that was a combination of garage space and office space for tradespeople. That's under construction right now. It's behind the storage facility. It's on 3A. The major part of that site, though, is the, again, the mixed-use building next to the station, the Ingham lumber site, and then some of the office buildings that are there on 3A. Does not include the Cohasset Lights landfill. And again, this is the bare minimum size we could do. What we could do with this district is put in our own requirements of height and setbacks, frontage, which we have done, and the calculations all work. These are projected for buildings that would be no more than 3 stories, in keeping with our 35-foot height limit. So that's what it looks like. Again, nothing is required to be built on this. It could stay this way forever. We also did this, and we're permitted to do this as an overlay district, meaning the underlying commercial zoning remains in place, so these properties can remain in commercial use. They won't become non-conforming, but they also can have this residential multifamily district allowed as right. Anybody have any questions about the site? The site, just so people know, it's 14 different assessed parcels, but that Situate Hill property is 4 different assessed parcels combined as one ownership. So it's 11 properties in ownership terms. It's 14 in assessment terms. Any questions about the site itself? Okay. We have the text of the bylaw. I'll just oh, that's all right. All right, so for the bylaw itself to implement this, we have to do a few steps. Again, relatively short and simple. Number one, we have to, of course, create the district itself, and it would be following the pattern you'll see in some other articles of reorganizing the zoning on 3A. It would be called the 3A Multifamily Overlay District. Those are the properties that would be included, and the 4 down at the bottom are the ones that are combined into a single ownership on Situate Hill Road. Most of them are on 3A itself. As you can see, there's one small property as you head up Crocker Lane before you get to the Cohasset Heights landfill. That's also included. All right, and scroll down, please. All right, and then when you create the district, we have to add the overlay district into our list of districts, Article 3 of the bylaw. Then we also have to amend Article 4, which is our section on uses, just to put in some text that to describe the uses of this project. Maybe you can scroll down a little more. That too is very simple, and the uses, multifamily, we are encouraged, mixed use, commercial uses, we hope will stay even if the residential is also built. We are allowed to encourage mixed use development. We are not allowed to mandate. developments. So language in here is a form of encouragement. And then we have to amend our table of uses. So rather than redo that whole table, which we just amended last fall for both Article 4 and 5's tables, we are just adding a new sub-table at the end specific for this district. So again, when it says yes, that means multifamily dwellings are allowed as of right, which is we can do. There was language in the original draft that I did about mentioning, bedroom mix of 1, 2, and 3s, and our consultants warded us off that. We even mentioned bedrooms would possibly risk rejection by the state. So again, we are not allowed to discuss that, nor will we be able to negotiate anything down on that in the same way we can with 40B. And then under Article 5, we have to amend our dimensional table. So we've added, again, a sub-table for this district. We've put in our own frontages, green strips, setbacks, building height, accessories building height, all consistent with our existing bylaw. The lot clearing and the coverage of the lot are similar to what we allow for commercial development on 3A. The part that is unique because of the state law is the density. We don't mention density elsewhere in our bylaw, but here it has to be 15 units per acre. And I also believe that the minimum acreage of a development has to be 1 acre. So with the exception of the Situate Hill property and the hardware property, Hingham lumber property, anybody wanting to do anything else is going to have to buy multiple properties and string them together to get to the minimum size. So the map then, last step would be to amend the map accordingly. And of course, the descriptive, you'll see the descriptive box of what it is we're trying to do. So it's that simple. What to do. I'm sure though, people have heard that there has been some opposition. Milton Town Meeting supported it. Milton's citizen group called for a special election. That election defeated it. Milton's getting sued. Milton has lost grants. That's the leverage that the state has against us. There's a town in Central Mass whose, I believe, town meeting has rejected it, a town on the North Shore. Both I think are towns that don't have direct stations. And then Marshfield did it a couple of weeks ago, but also last week. I think a half dozen towns passed it, and well over 100 towns now have passed this. The deadline to do so is the end of this year. So, if for any reason this were to be defeated, we'd have another shot in the fall to get it passed. So
Up anywhere where you can see it.
yeah, I'm sorry, Kevin, this is,
Is it available somewhere?
Should be on the website.
it should be on the website for the bylaw. The zoning bylaw committee has its own page under on the town website, so it should have all of this material. If you could just scroll back, get to the map, just so people have them. Yeah. Okay. So, all right, Clark.
Yeah, Tom, can you explain to people what the benefit of passing this law, or what the benefit the state hopes will help Cohasset specifically, or what the penalty might be if we didn't pass?
Thank you for asking that. Well, first of all, it is state law, and towns don't get to reject it any more than towns and states get to reject federal law or applicable to them. And what Milton is facing is a lawsuit where basically it's seeking an injunction, or basically to order them to comply with state law, which my opinion as an attorney, if I can put my attorney hat on for a minute, they're going to lose that. Milton's going to lose. Milton has already had some seawall grants, even though they don't have much exposure to the water, but that's a big one for coastal communities. And so other discretionary grants. And now I know people will say, and it was early on when we had discussions amongst the boards, it was brought up, well, we don't get a lot of grants. What's the difference? Well, again, we could be losing grants, but we can also be compelled to do this whether we get grants or not, just because it is state law. The other threat that I haven't seen carried out, but was an early threat that was rumored, was that they would start withholding housing authority funds, which our housing authority property, even though we have helped maintain it in recent years with community preservation money, is mostly state funded. And we'd have to take up that slack, obviously, and so there is that potential, and then you could be putting the residents of our housing authority property, at risk because people have their nose out of joint about this law, but, the law was passed again in 2022, the legislature passed it, Governor Baker was the governor at the time, he signed it. It is a one-size-fits-all approach, the original regulations were worse, it's been honed down a bit, but there isn't a lot of discrimination between small towns and big towns. The target is something roughly 15% of your current housing stock is what it's supposed to yield. And for Cohasset, the math works out that it's a little closer to 19%. And that's a big hit. It might not be, Newton passed this, they did it by the council, not by a town meeting. Newton has a ton of stations and I believe the potential is 10,000 units, but maybe a place like Newton can absorb that. For Cohasset to absorb a 19% increase in its housing stock is a lot. But again, this isn't mandating that anything get built. It'll be very expensive for anybody to redevelop this land, particularly since there's no sewage disposal. There are wetlands issues, other constraints. It is not one-stop shopping like 40B to go to one board in town. They'll have to go the whole route of development and permitting. And again, and you think around and all across Eastern Mass where stations are, they're already heavily developed areas. So, redeveloping things that are already built out is prohibitively expensive. I don't know what they're thinking. Maybe it's just for them to feel good to say they've done something because, like it or not, we do have a crisis in this state of affordable housing. And, the theory about the thinking of the state for a long time, since 40B passed 40 years ago, was that that burden should be shared by every community, not just the big cities. And that's the thinking behind all of this.
Excuse me, Tom, just one distinction. It's not the intent of this housing choice program to be affordable housing. It's market rate workforce housing.
Right, well, and thank you for bringing that up. One of the things we are allowed to do, and that is in this bylaw, is that our inclusionary zoning bylaw, which requires that 10% of anything built over 5 units have 10% affordable units so that we can keep pace with our 40B count. Because again, that law is still out there too, and we have to keep complying with that. We can put that in this bylaw, and we are putting this in this bylaw so that we can keep pace with 40B. The theory under 40B and lots of other the housing laws, 40R, 40 this, 40 that, has been that rentals are considered more affordable than ownership units because you don't have to come up with a down payment. If anybody knows whatever Avalon is called today, the Preserve, that has, since it was done under 40B, that in theory has 25% affordable units based on the formula for this metropolitan area, which is an expensive area. And yet the affordable units, I understand, in that project are now 1,600 and better a month. Is that affordable? No, but that's formula that the state uses. The theory again is that rental is more quote unquote affordable than. They may be. I know that they've gotten expensive in there, but it's all based on a state formula that you have to be some X percentage of the median housing, and we live in a very expensive area now. Western Mass, it might be somewhat different. It's not. So.
Is there anything to stop somebody from coming in and buying so much acreage so that they can build, but not have to follow certain rules?
In terms of what? No.
Well, I mean.
No, I mean, again, all other zoning still applies. And as a matter of fact, the text we're adding to Article 4 specifically has a line that says that. It mentions stormwater specifically, but if anybody were to come in and try to develop here, they're going to have to come to the planning board for a site plan review. If they want any relief from a setback or anything else, they'll have to go to the zoning board for a variance, which they won't get. They'll have to go to Concom for a stormwater permit and maybe a wetlands permit. And they'll have to go to the Board of Public Health to figure out their sewage problem.
They're gonna have to put septic because they can't use cesspools or.
They can't use cesspools. They're going to, you know,
Public.
for a large scale development, they're going to have to more likely do a mini sewage treatment plant, and that's expensive. And then you also, the wastewater from that mini plant has to go somewhere. And that's not easy either, because we all know from years ago about the fights about Cohasset Heights expanding, that our water supply is not that far away.
Cohasset Water Department, water grant plan, able of being in that maintenance, in addition to what we already do.
Yeah, there's a lot of development constraints, which is why I'm not sure the state's approach is actually well thought through. They also apparently, I don't know if they've talked to the highway department. You know, North Situate is going to have to add these units. The redesign of 3A from Beechwood down to the Situate line is nearly complete, and I think construction starts next year. The redesign of 3A North, where this would be, is 60% through the process, but you know, you know, in both places, the one in 3A South, by the way, is just going to be, there's going to be a middle turning lane. They can't add lanes, but probably the same for the north side. But, you know, have they thought about the traffic loads? I don't know that they have, but
What happened at site? Okay, when they did the station.
well, one of the things that I mentioned to you before the meeting is that the bylaw committee is working on what we call a development impact or mitigation bylaw. There are very few towns that actually have it. The towns that do are much, much bigger than us and have much larger scale commercial development than us. But we hope to have a bylaw like that in place in the fall town meeting. And what that would do would, on a large scale project like any that would be built here, the developer would have to contribute to certain types of mitigation. But as I also mentioned to you, the one type of mitigation they can't, that by state law, we can't mandate, is to mitigate against in any connection with school population. Now, school population, you know, Avalon, when it was proposed and when it was going through its permitting, had a projection, I recall, of, I think it was 76, 67, 76 kids. I understand from people who've served on the school committee historically, it never reached that, not even close. Maybe that's because everything was put down to 2 bedrooms. Here will be different. Your project could have 2 bedrooms, it could have 3 bedrooms, because they are trying to encourage family development of family units. So it's unpredictable, but you know, I think the experience of Avalon might be that sometimes these predictions wildly inaccurate, but we won't know that, you know, we won't know that until we actually see, if we ever see a project. Any other questions about it? All right, and just for everybody's benefit, every board that's looked at this, the bylaw committee, the Board of Appeals, planning board, select board, and advisory committee, five of them have unanimously endorsed this bylaw. As a matter of fact, all 7 bylaws have been unanimously endorsed by all those 5 boards. So, again, I don't think we have much choice but to do it. It's the thing to do. And I think we've taken a very smart and measured approach to trying to minimize the impact to the town as much as we can. So. All right, well, we'll go back now in order how they're going to show up at town meeting. So Articles 16, 17, 18, and 19 are to reorganize the format and the structure of the bylaw. And this was something the bylaw committee had talked about. Actually, the predecessor bylaw working group had talked about from day one. When we started this project, Cohasset had 22 zoning articles in the bylaw. 2 had become sunsetted, the marijuana moratorium and the senior overlay district, so that brought us down to 20. A lot of things had been added over the time. When we reformed Article 12, which is the administration and enforcement article back in the spring last year, we eliminated Article 13, so now we're down to 19 articles. This first step is to reorganize that structure to its final form, which is to get us down to 12 articles. What it means for the remaining articles, most of them will be just consolidated, where we're going to create articles that have similar topics, then have those topics be dealt with as sections within the articles rather than separate standalone articles. You know, over the years, we've just tacked on stuff to the original bylaw without much thought about how it integrates with the rest of it. So this is just going to be for organizational simplicity. And we originally looked at the town of Concord, which is eight articles, and use that as our model. We've gotten it to 12. So the first, we call it ZBC 1, but it'll be Article 16 at town meeting. Is going to just do the structural reorganization. So if we could just scroll up, down, I mean. All right, so to consolidate everything, Article 18 is our article about the village zoning. Well, that's a form of use. So that's going to be moved into Article 4 as a new section 4.6. And what you saw in the MBTA article, the MBTA also a form of use that will be moved into Article 4 as 4.7. Articles 11, 10, 9, and 14, well, 9, 10, 11, and 14 are similar in that they are other types of land use regulations. So they are going to go into a new article that is titled that, and they'll become sections of it respectively. Article 11 is the land alteration bylaw. Article 10 is the cluster development bylaw. Article 9 is the floodplain and watershed protection bylaw. And by the way, that will definitely have some amendment, very small amendments. We have a grant to work with MAPC. We met with them last week. That will be coming up in the fall. 14 is our watershed protection district. So whether there's any changes to the substance of those articles will come up, if at all, in the fall. We haven't got that far yet. If you could just scroll back up a sec. And then, yeah,
That Article 14, that's a water resource district?
and that's outside the scope of what MAPC is doing. But so we'll take a look at that. Article 10, which is the cluster development, we decided to table any thought about changing frontage in order to combine that with an analysis of Article 10. So if anything happens with it, it will come. But all of these articles at the moment are moving just the way they are, just as they're written now, no changes, just moving them and reshuffling them around to have a better organization. The two alternative energy articles that we now have, 19, which is wind energy, and 20, which is solar, they would go into one article about alternative energy and become sections. We are reserving Article 11, a new Article 11. That is the proposed location for the development impact bylaw, if and when it is created for next fall. The only thing then missing, if you're keeping count, is Article 17, which is the transportation-oriented district. It's what governs that building, that mixed-use building next to the train station. And that is going to be eliminated, and you'll see in the next article as we reorganize the zoning. So that's simply the structure of the bylaw, and this will show you, if you go down to the appendix, what the new table of contents will look like, and what, again, originally 22 articles spread all over with topics, similar topics spread all over the place, will be a much more neat and cohesive package. All right. Any questions about that one? That's pretty straightforward. All right, the next article, which will be Article 17, 18, and 19 are all designed to consolidate zoning districts. And part of the thinking of this is to get rid of districts that we created but never have used, don't use, and it's basically going back to what we once had in a lot of respects. The first one deals with 3A, and at one point in time, all the commercial areas on 3A was a single district called the Highway Business District. If you have the map up for that. Yeah, so there, once everything, so the light green and the green areas are residential. The red is what remains today of highway business, and then at some point in the past, we created a light industry district next to the train station, and then a technology business district on the other side of the street where Hingham Lumber and the landfill are. A lot of that was done to target the proposed expansion of landfill. We have not enticed any light industrial or technology businesses in the area. As a matter of fact, in the planning board the other night, and what might be the last thing new we permit in the technology business district, we are getting ready to permit another storage facility. So we'll have two. So the proposal here is just to all go back to a single commercial district as we once had for all of those areas. It would now be called the 3A Commercial District, sort of match, we're calling the other thing the 3A multifamily overlay. It would take the dimensions of the highway business district, and it would take the use highway business. Our town council caught that when we were eliminating the technology district, we had to be careful that we were eliminating medical marijuana use, can't do, and we were eliminating solar facility uses. So those are carrying over. Interestingly, though, storage facility is unique to technology business will go away. Yet we will have two buildings, we will have two storage facilities as the legacy of the technology business district. So it's very, again, straightforward. Eliminate districts we do not use, have not seen development for, again, for the sake of simplicity and ease of regulating under the bylaws. Again, boundaries on this will not change. And again, it's a back to the future thing. We're going back to what we once had.
I don't see the difference between those two pictures.
I know.
Purple becomes red.
Yeah, all the purple, yeah, I guess I'll talk to Cassandra about that, but the purple will all become red again, and that's what it once was before the purple was created 20, 30 years ago.
That's what I wanted you to say.
Yeah, no, it's all gonna become a single commercial district. Okay. And that's, again, fairly straightforward. Now, the next article, Article 18 under the warrant, is going to be the harbor. Now, the harbor has, for a long time, had a mix of districts. It has had what's called waterfront business. It's had that's of the blue area, as you see right on the water, basically the hotel site, and then the Atlantica site and the lobster pound and boatyard next to it. On the land side of Elm Street has been a remnant of what once was downtown business. Our largest downtown business area used to be the Village, but 20 years ago, or 17, 15 years ago, how long it was, we changed that. So there's little vestiges of downtown business. And then down at the end of Parker Avenue is residential on one side, open space in the back where the marsh and the ditch is. And Government Island, these are all open space. You see that purple area down where the marina is. Again, we developed that, we created it as light industry at some point. I don't know what the purpose of that. I don't recall why we did that. I was here when it happened, but I don't recall. So, and then when you get back up to the more upper left, all that area that is crosshatched, we created a couple of years ago, the Harbor Village Business Overlay District, which allows mixed use and is what is led to the development down at the old hotel site and the building across the street. The remaining commercial buildings on the land side of Elm Street are also in that overlay district and theoretically could be redeveloped as mixed use. So in going forward, so one of the goals was to just, we're using the word polyglot of zoning, to just have a single commercial district in the harbor Um, the harbor in the past had two districts, It had the downtown business on the land side of Elm Street and waterfront business everywhere else. So it go back to a single district, which would be called the Harbor District, and it would include the purple area at the marina, the blue areas, and it would include the dark orange areas, which are the land side of Elm Street. This is the one place where we're also proposing one boundary change, and that is to take the Legion building, which is in a commercial use, take it out of Residence B and put it in this harbor commercial district to basically make it a conforming use rather than a non-conforming use. That is the one boundary change of any of it. Again, this would take on the dimensions and the uses that are allowed in the waterfront business district. They don't really diverge from the downtown business. It will eliminate another part of downtown business once and it will again just create a consistency. But the other thing that it will eliminate is Article 22 and the overlay district. So it was a decision by the bylaw committee fairly early on that we were not going to encourage additional mixed-use development and condo development, or that we're going to try to preserve commercial uses, commercial properties in the harbor. So the current project, of course, would become a pre-existing non-conforming use. That's not going to change it, but we would it would eliminate the possibility of those remaining small one-story buildings on Elm Street, at the end of Elm Street. And it would not encourage the spread of mixed use or condos any further. Or so that will be, yes, I'm sorry,
I don't want to disrupt your flow.
but you will.
On this.
Oh, yeah, I've been taking questions as we go along, so if you have one, fire away. Because, well, no, it's pretty, again, this is pretty straightforward. It's somewhat going back again to what we used to have, which was a lot simpler commercial zoning down there, except now we would combine downtown business with waterfront business, and we would add the Legion to basically make it a conforming use since it is in commercial use. It's getting pretty straightforward.
So as someone who lives in Parker Ave, we are concerned about development down in your area. And I'm trying to understand what the changes might mean to any future uses, particularly the marina, which is the light industry.
Yep. Well, again,
Understand what new uses might be allowed in the new harbor district that would pertain to that purple parcel.
I'm trying to think of when the marina was built, if we had already made the switch of the districts.
It was, I want to say, late 80s.
Yeah. I don't know when the light industry was, I don't know if when it was created. I also don't know why it was created. I don't know what the objective was, but it formerly was waterfront business. And so the same uses that could have happened in the past would happen in the future because we're carrying over those uses and those dimensions. Light industry is the thing that could have had more noxious uses. The Haggerty property was never rezoned. It's now, well, if it was, it's now open space, I believe. So nothing would get developed there, and the town owns it, so town wouldn't do anything. The marina is an allowed use under waterfront business. It was then, it would be now. So the marina could continue in existence.
And the marina is a great neighbor.
Yeah.
It's a good use. I think our concern mainly would be residential.
Well, no, but by getting rid of, well, there's no residential allowed there to begin with in that zoning, and it wasn't allowed in waterfront business either. There has been inquiries made to expand our overlay district to allow mixed use, but that was an inquiry that I received personally from some potential purchaser of property, but it was in the other direction, wasn't in that direction. So again, that site is, are you guys, you're not Seward on Parker Avenue, are you?
Yes, we are.
Oh, you are. Oh, all right. Well, that's one constraint that's gone, but I don't foresee that, given its location, that you'll see anything outrageous there. It was a marina, but I think before Paul bought it as well. So it's been that way I just think it's an impractical site for a lot of noxious things, but anything that would be obviously marine related, Now, the other thing, the hotel was there as of right, because the hotel use is an allowed use. That's the only type of commercial type of residential.
That is, would be allowed.
I believe it is an allowed use in that district, yeah. And so there's been rumors about the Lobster Pound site, but it wouldn't change what the rumor is, but
I think I'm mainly concerned with what the change brings into the bylaw that residents on Parker Ave would want to be followed.
it doesn't bring any change from what has been forever since we've had zoning. What it takes away is whatever threat of a more noxious development that light industry brings along. Again, for the life of me, can't understand unless, I don't believe that the line includes the Haggerty property, because that was once an industrial use. It was a furniture factory. I don't know if it was meant to include that, but I don't believe it does include it. So, again, I think that site is more governed by the practicability of doing anything, that isolated end of Parker Ave. Could there be a marine store, related business? Yes.
Could there be support? Concerns, support operations for things like oyster farm. If, the oyster farm deal with.
Let's just run right into the landmine, huh?
No.
No, I hear what you're saying. Look, yeah, well, yeah.
According to the table, agriculture and aquaculture are both, yes, in light industry and waterfront business.
they always have been.
Is that-
They always have been.
So, I
I mean, yours, Mike, that's purely speculative, because here's
I'm just trying to understand the change. I'm not.
private owner of an oyster farm and private owner of the marina would have to come to some agreement where they can dock a boat at the marina.
the light industry is a little bit more, lenient in terms of uses than a waterfront business. So I'd say the change is more restrictive
Mm.
as opposed to opening up all kinds of possibilities.
Yeah.
And all the residential types are indicated as no, both light industry and waterfront business.
Right. I mean, the hotel project was developed during COVID. It was the first time we were using Zoom. It was hard for people to picture it. But, I think it's fair to say there's been a lot of outcry seeing it go up. So like I said, the bylaw committee very early on, even the previous working group had said, we don't want to see more condo development in the harbor. Is it difficult for businesses to survive in this day and age with brick and mortar stores? Yes. And have we lost the boat, Carrie's Boatyard? Yes. But, we're hoping that by keeping that commercial zoning, we remember that Cohasset is a working harbor as well as a recreational harbor. And, hopefully we'll encourage those kinds of uses that we historically had. Yep. Paul,
Allow the uses on Parker Avenue,
say what? I'm saying?
town council government, allow the uses.
In terms of? Well, I mean,
Arrows.
well, I mean, again, we were just trying to, in this article, just consolidate, clean up, neaten, make the bylaw a little easier to understand and more user-friendly with less, all these different districts. We didn't get into analyzing uses. We're not proposing any radical change in this go round to the uses. Now, next go round, if somebody wants to analyze the waterfront business uses that are allowed, which who knows when they were last looked at comprehensively, you could do that. But also be aware that if you singled out a commercial property, one commercial property on Parker Ave and treated it different than the rest of the district, that wouldn't fly. All right, so that's that. That's the harbor one. Yeah, sure.
Has your group reached out to Cohasset Harbor Marina to engage them in a discussion?
No. Their use wouldn't be affected in any way.
What's that?
Their use wouldn't be affected in any way. Because either they were permitted under the old zoning or they are engaging in a use that has been allowed in the waterfront business since the district was created, probably since we've had zoning. So yeah, this is the only one where we're proposing a boundary change to take the Legion out of a residential district and put it into a commercial district.
Residential in that. So Parker Avenue has residential. Is that part of that district?
No. No, the harbor, just like waterfront business before it, is kind of broken up into pieces and places, not a contiguous. But the thought was, again, the commercial zoning should all be one thing, consistent, simple, easy to understand. And again, not only is Parker Avenue not part of it, neither is Government Island. All right, the next one then is going to be Article 19, and this is just to consolidate how we deal with the zoning of the villages we have. We have the main village downtown, but maybe a lot of people don't know. We have commercial village areas in West Corner, which is the area on the left, the map on the left, and it's that darkest orange area up at the top. It's where the restaurant is. It's where the building, the antique store that burned down that now has a Habitat for Humanity house. And then when you cross the street, there was an old shop, and I believe there was a fire substation at some point in time. And then you get to that pumping, the gate facility for Straits Pond where the town line is. So it's roughly about 4 properties. Beechwood is much more extensive village area. So both of these are still zoned downtown business. They are the remnants of downtown business. And again, the largest downtown business area, which was in downtown, was rezoned in 2007. And this is just a step to get rid of downtown business once and for all everywhere, the harbor and these areas. And these 2 areas would switch to the same zoning as the village. And that means mixed use. That means the dimensional requirements, all the other requirements are not that different from downtown business. Now in Beechwood, we're not proposing any boundary changes. In the future, I think some consideration should be given to whether the Beechwood area is shrunk. The lower part, so you see the Beechwood map, that's the darker orange area. The lower rectangle is the area between where Doan and what's the other street? Church, Doan and Church. I could drive through it. Where they split right up to Beechwood Street. I think there's 2 residences down on the lower part of it, and then there's 536 Beechwood, I think is the address. 536 Beechwood is the site of an old general store, been dilapidated for years. The planning board, now going close to a year ago, permitted that for mixed use. So it was allowed under the downtown business zoning. So that, again, switching the name from DB to VIL won't change anything. That building is permitted. Its construction has kind of halted, but the building is permitted for an ice cream shop, general store kind of thing with an apartment or 2 above it. The larger rectangle is then when you cross Beechwood Street and go up Doan towards Wampatuck. Those are all residences. There is one building there's a house on the corner of Beechwood and Doan, and then the next building in is an old commercial. That was a store, that's the only thing that, yeah,
Since before 1971.
yeah, so it's the only other building that has had some remembrance of a commercial use, but nothing else is in commercial use there. So for the purpose of this bylaw, again, just to change this naming and the simplicity of the zoning, we haven't changed the boundaries, but some thought might be given to that in the future. The only commercial property there has been re-permitted for the same type of mixed use they would have with the change in designation, so. Again, it's nothing radical here, and then no boundary changes at this point.
Tom, I don't know if you mentioned that the jurisdiction of the village bylaw, as compared to the downtown business is planning board.
Mhm.
So by consolidating the special permit review would be, planning.
Yes, it would. Which, depending on your, zoning board of appeals, maybe it should. No, they haven't complained. I don't think anybody minds when they take away some potential workload, but we ended up permitting the Beechwood project anyway. I don't know how we got that anyway, but we did. So we meaning the planning board. So, right, so those are the reorganization articles. And again, with the new structure, then whatever changes come in the future can come. All right, now, our existing Article 7 is parking. That one has thus far not been amended in our previous go-rounds at town meeting. It's up for this time. We are doing some housekeeping changes and some substantive change that I will talk about. Article 7 is our article that deals with parking and off-street parking and loading zones as well. So the major housekeeping change is right there in the table. Last fall, we changed Article 4, which is includes our table of uses. The current table here in this article is very similar. It has use on one side and parking requirement on the other side. What we are just doing here is making the uses all conform to what we did with the new Article 4 table. We've joined a few of them in one category just for the sake of space, but now all the uses will be consistent in terminology between Article 4 and Article 7. On the other side of it is the parking requirements. For most of it, there was no substantive change. We just, again, simplicity's sake, taking what we have, moving it over to this because there hasn't been a lot of areas of controversy. You'll see that first one, which is a bunch of open air uses, farms and agriculture, where it says sufficient parking spaces. Town council suggested we get rid of the word sufficient as much as we could, and in places we could, we did. Childcare facility, I believe currently says sufficient number of spaces, so we put in a minimum standard for that. But a lot of the open air uses, sufficient is sufficient. The word sufficient is sufficient, and it's never created a controversy with a permit in town before. I want to scroll down to the. All right, dwellings in the commercial district. This is where we made a change. So you'll see of those dwelling residential use categories, the bottom one, the one family in the multifamily overlay district. This is the one piece of that MBTA bylaw that's in a different spot. We are going with 1.5 spaces per unit. Our neighbors in Hingham are following that as well. It works with the model to keep the district to the 55 acres we've identified. We didn't want to expand it more than we had to. And then when you move up or just above that, it's the village. And also for the 3A commercial in the harbor, there are no residences there, but we have a parking standard for them anyway, but it's the village that created some discussion with the select board. Currently in the village, our requirement for residential units built in the village, which is allowing mixed use, is 1 space per unit. Now, since I've been on the planning board, we've permitted 1 Pleasant Street, the garage, the gas station. I'm not sure. Oh, and the little one on Brook Street, we permitted. Everything that has been permitted so far in recently has been all residential parking has all been on site. In case of the gas station, they had 12 units and they proposed 18, which is 1.5 per unit. Whether that project goes forward under its current permit is all speculative at this point. 1 Pleasant Street had all of its residential and all of its commercial requirements met on site. So, we can debate with the select board about what's driving the parking problem in the village. I argue it's space and it's the other commercial uses. It's not the residential uses because they haven't been built yet. And if there are people parking there overnight, they're coming from somewhere else. And maybe it's in an earlier project that was residential that only did 1 per unit and it was not enough. So we went back and forth with the select board on this and we've come to a compromise for the moment to see how this works, which is to require 1.5 spaces of residential per residential unit. Okay. And that is a significant increase over what we have now. And again, the gas station project would have met this requirement as changed. 1 Pleasant Street, I believe, meets this requirement as changed for its residential component. But we'll see what that does and see if that addresses some of the concerns. Go back and forth. We have a member of the select board here who debates this with me all the time. But, we've come up with a compromise to see how this will work. In all honesty, there are very absent, major tear downs of existing buildings on Main Street. There isn't much left to develop in the village. There's potentially 1 site, but it's somewhat landlocked at the moment. So that's a major constraint. So, like I said, the planning board has been very good about insisting on all the residential parking of a site be done on site, and everywhere that we've permitted in the last 3 years, that's happened. So that's the substantive change. If we scroll down way at the bottom, we did add a section 7.4 about access, and it's just basically stating the obvious about how one accesses a residential property, either through a subdivision or through a common driveway, the requirements for which we changed last fall, or some road that's in between. You're just setting some minimum standards of what those mean. And that was borrowed from a bylaw in Plymouth, and planning board's been kicking that around as a regulation or a bylaw for a long time. So it's not a major substantive change because it's pretty much stating the obvious, but it's now in text in the bylaw. So any questions about the parking? And Paul, I don't know if yeah, go ahead.
Spaces.
Because I'm sorry.
How do you get it now?
Because you're usually not dealing with 1 unit, 1 residential unit. So for example, the gas station site had 12 units. So under this requirement, they'd need 18 spaces, and that's what they provided. They were tandem, some of them were tandem spaces. If you had actually lived there, it'd be a little difficult to deal with, but so it depends on the total number of units, but it usually can work out, but you'd round up. Somebody would have to round up.
So really, I think what you're saying is the entire project is allocated 18 spaces. People that live there have to work it out amongst themselves as to.
Yeah, but if you have a mix, like, for example, I believe the gas station project in those 12 units, Clark, I don't know if you remember, how many were 1 bedrooms and studios and how many were two bedrooms, but they did have a mix of studio, one bedroom and two.
It's one lot that the resident.
Correct. Correct. The developer is going to look at it in total. And then how it will actually work out in practice will depend on, again, how many studios, one bedrooms, what's the demand on, a two-bedroom unit is expected to demand, generate two cars in most people's thinking.
You're gonna buy two cars.
Yeah. that's what it says.
So,
Yeah, but you can't assume that for every unit. One-bedroom units and studios may just have one car, so.
You're a married couple, two people, and each one has their own car.
And that's a problem.
Yeah, that's a problem.
And that's not a that's not a problem. That's not a problem. Well,
I believe now,
Yeah.
in my house.
Look.
Not everything.
Yeah.
So we maximize the space within that car. So we have to,
Yeah,
I mean, to be honest with you, I wanted two.
One,
I
two.
wanted one better.
Yeah.
Now.
well,
you don't have-
yeah, no,
they
the,
have to be-
yeah.
makes the owner have to come up, you create.
what we were also concerned about on the bylaw committee is that to make the restriction too much, it might stifle redevelopment in the village, which was the intent of the bylaw 17 years ago, when the village was a much different looking place and had a lot of vacancies, and we were trying to provide value to people by allowing mixed use. Now, again, there isn't much left to develop in the village. And Paul and I disagree on this, but it's not residential parking again, which none of the permitted buildings are actually up and running yet and have residents yet. So it's not residential parking that's driving the problem in the village. It's the commercial uses. We have a lot of thriving hospitality businesses. We have a hotel that's a function facility, and on the weekends, a nice summer night, yes, it's a problem.
Even during the week.
But those uses are not going to, they are not going to have, and could be a problem in the harbor too, which has even more parking constraints. But it is a space problem, as far as I'm concerned, not a zoning problem. And,
I know when I-
no, but in the village, we have a likely very expensive place to add parking, but it would be expensive. But, we did this zoning to revitalize the village, and it's only been really in the last 10 years that has really, I think, taken off, and a lot of the redevelopment has occurred. But it's been fairly successful. But what's successful is hospitality-driven business, not office uses, not,
Every time we've gone down to use the bank, and I've driven around places, and that's it, done, I'm going up.
now, again, we talked about this at the last select board meeting, that apparently there are cars parked in there overnight. Well, where they're coming from, who knows? Because nobody is living in the new residences that have been permitted yet. So I don't know where they're coming, but that's a policy decision if, how we're going to treat overnight parking. So if somebody is two people in a one-bedroom apartment and there's not enough space in their development, what are they going to do with their second car? Well, that'll be a policy decision of whether we're going to enforce overnight parking or not, so. Those aren't zoning problems, is what I'm saying. The
Library has signs, oh, my car.
library is the town. The town has made that decision that that's not a place where they want to see residences parking overnight cars. So that's fine. And they can make that decision for the village in the future.
Might want to do that in the village too.
They might. And then it will become the resident and developer's problem. But again, what's been permitted has already meets the requirement. So. Yes, Mike.
Going back to the harbor and parking.
Harbor's another.
Harbor committee and parking is a major area of concern.
Mhm. Yep.
With these changes, is there any lift for getting more parking around the harbor to support a lot of the activities that are
Scroll up a minute. Again, the harbor, right there, the harbor district would be also subject to this 1.54 residences. But there are no, other than what's already been permitted at the hotel site, there are no residences and will be no new residences in the harbor district itself. The Cohasset Hospitalities project.
It's not a hotel.
Well, I'm referring to its old use.
I just want to be clear.
Yeah. The new development in the harbor, yeah. And that, Clark, refresh my memory too. I think we permitted sufficient on-site spaces. They have garages in both buildings.
Yeah.
So they are on site. Now, personally, I think there was another alternative to redevelop the intersection, which would have added a few more on-street parking spaces, but that hasn't happened yet. That's a different story. Again, the harbor problem is space, not zoning necessarily. The redevelopment of Atlantica has sufficient spaces on site in that little parking lot, but it meets the zoning requirement at the time. Whether it meets this change, I don't know. They have a temporary solution of employee parking at a satellite lot that they're renting. There's no permanence in that, of course, 1-year rental. We have a town parking lot up there that's, I assume is empty most nights. Other than the required spaces for the residents of the Lightkeeper's house. So I don't know if some kind of shuttle program could be done, but, again, it all depends on what's going to happen down there. The new project has space for a restaurant. Atlantica is going to have, daytime quick food, ice cream uses, but it's also in what used to be the function room, going to have a small formal nighttime restaurant. Salt House is there. It's going to remain there. So, there will be hospitality uses in the harbor as well. And those are going to make certain demands. We have a small, 17 space lot next to the memorial. So it's that many. We've got covenants with the owners of the new condo. Don't be using that town spot for overnight parking, but those are going to have to be enforced. Both places, it's a space problem more than anything else, not a zoning problem.
Few years ago, there was proposals, ideas floated to widen a stretch of Water Street from about, and going by bad memory, but more or less where the Veterans Memorial is towards Tower, towards Lawrence, which is where the memorial is for.
Mhm.
There was some talk of trying to expand out over the water in order to create more parking room there. Is there anything in these changes that would preclude that? So it would still have to be, it's still part of the harbor district. And parking would fall into the harbor district tables. Parking.
Yeah,
So that would be a municipal use.
can we scroll down? So the business uses, so for example, restaurant. So again, this is not changing what we already have. So restaurants are going to have these, and again, if that becomes the dominant commercial use in the harbor, those are the parking requirements and those are going to have to be met. And that's going to be a problem for anybody to do that on site. The Atlantica site, because the footprint of the existing restaurant is going to become much smaller, meets the requirement of that, except then they have a problem with where do their employees go. And theoretically, they could set up a valet system for overflow customers to use this satellite location as well. The new project and the Salt House, they will possibly have a problem here. But the new project has spaces in the garages that are supposed to accommodate all of this, so. Again, the Border Street, as you know, already allows, there's no curb, so it allows parking along the waterfront, basically onto the sidewalk to try to accommodate on-street parking. And I say there was another proposal that would have added some spaces, had redesigned the Summer Elm Cove Road intersection, which had been proposed by a number of people, but it isn't going to happen at the moment. So it's constantly going to be a challenge, but the requirements are going to be there and developers would have to meet them. And if they can't meet them because of space constraints, well, then so be it. And we're not going to have those kinds of developments, I guess. Yes, but we don't need to get into that debate. So, in particular with the harbor, the property owners and the town in some combination are going to have to get creative about use of satellite locations and shuttle or valet services if hospitality takes off. So anyway, so that's the parking change. All right, we're done with that. We'll go to that's going to be Article 21. And then the last one is the one substantive dimensional change we're making to Article 5 Table of Dimensions on this go round. This is to create the idea of a border zone where the village and harbor commercial districts border residential districts. We're not calling it a buffer zone because the buffer zone is a term of art used in conservation, wetlands law, so we couldn't use that. So it's border zone. And what we're essentially doing is creating a strip along the boundary only where the village or harbor commercial property meets a residential property, not between them. So, the various commercial uses along Main Street will still have the normal setbacks, but it's basically to create a slightly larger setback and a slightly smaller building height limit to basically give it sort of a step back effect from the residential property line. So again, you could count probably on, it doesn't apply to properties across the street. So in the harbor, I'm trying to think of where anything on the waterfront, well, the new project where it borders residences on Elm Street, but that's already built, so it's pre-existing non-conforming. And then where the Legion is. The Legion will become commercial property, but it still borders a residential property. And then everything else is separated by streets or something. So there's two properties that are impacted by this. One already redeveloped. And in the village, you just have to think around the village edges where a commercial property or residential property. So it's just to create a step back effect. So commercial use isn't coming up right up to the residential property line at its nearest setback and its maximum height.
The question on the Oaks.
Oh, let's switch the subject. That is Residence C. It is proposed to stay as Residence C. I will tell you that is where an inquiry was made about expanding the overlay district and the mixed use was inquiring specifically about that property. Haven't heard anything else beyond that inquiry. I understand it's for sale. It's a residential use. They still, whatever happens there has to comply with residency zoning. And there was some thought of taking the yacht clubhouse and putting that in the harbor district to make that a conforming use, but decided not to expand, and not to leapfrog the Oaks and create any kind of problems that leapfrogging it might create. We didn't want to, in the end, we decided not to rezone the yacht clubhouse only because of why, somebody might say, what's the logic of leapfrogging the Oaks? Just to take, the yacht club is a pre-existing non-conforming use. It's not going anywhere. It's not impacted by the status of being pre-existing non-conforming. It got to rebuild without any problem being pre-existing non-conforming. Yacht club is fine where it is, but the Oaks is going to remain RC. As is the Bellarmine property that's beyond the yacht club. So. The point of all of this effort over the course of these town meetings has been to, clean up and reform the bylaw without going into a lot of radical change. We did have a couple of other proposals and they may come back in the fall. There was one or two that we might deal with, but everything else is pretty much designed to just clean it up, neaten it up, deal with the fact that since 1986, when the last time we really looked at Article 4 and 5, the uses and the dimensions, we've tacked on all kinds of things, a lot of which we're not even using. So that's mostly the objective here. No? Each kid has called me in the last 10 minutes. There must be something up. So, any other questions about any of this or, speculation on the future? We will have another go round in the fall. The final changes of any that we make will come forward in the fall. There are proposals to do a lot of housekeeping on the wind and solar articles, a lot of housekeeping. You will see very small, surprisingly small changes on the floodplain and watershed bylaw. We found out the other night that, we all have to comply with the newest state model bylaw and that we're pretty close. So that'll end up being minor housekeeping. And then you may see a couple of proposals in Article 5 on dimensional stuff and hopefully the mitigation, the development impact and mitigation bylaw, which would, again, is unusual for a town our size to do, but we think it's going to be necessary, particularly if we ever see the kind of the state wants us, the kind of development that the state wants us to have on creative.
What did you say about the fall? Isn't this for June town meeting?
Yeah, no, this is for June. I'm just giving you a little preview into the future. And then by the fall, we should be done with the reform of the bylaw. The only other thing down the pike is that we may engage MAPC into looking into new bylaws to deal with climate change, climate resiliency, that kind of thing. Wouldn't be ready in spring 25. So that's it. All right, thank you all for coming. I appreciate the questions. Were there any questions online? None? Okay.